Welcome back to our weekly financial market roundup. Let's dive into some highlights. On the 19th of December, Apple announced its plan to halt Apple Watch sales on the Series 9 and Ultra 2. The newest watch releases as it prepares to comply with a US import ban ordered by a federal trade agency that found the company violated patents of a competitor. Now, on the 21st of December, the company already paused US online sales of the Apple Watch Series 9 and Apple Watch Ultra 2. In the same week, Warner Bros. Discovery and Paramount CEOs discussed a possible merger between the media giants. However, it is reported that no formal talks between the companies are underway. Indeed, the regulatory environment for mergers and acquisitions under the Biden administration has been tough. The combination of two large movie studios and the Max and Paramount Plus streaming services will likely face scrutiny from antitrust enforcers. On the 20th, Warner Bros. Discovery stock closed down 5.7% at $11.66 a share and fell 1.4% in after-hours trading. Paramount stock closed down 2% at $15.5 a share and fell nearly 1% in after-hours trading. What am I talking about? This is not a finance channel. I had two pretty bad reading months last month and this month. And the only great books that I read recently are A Man Called Ove and Northanger Abbey. And in this wrap up, I do have books from 1 star all the way to 5 stars. The first book I finished last month was You and Me on Vacation, or People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry, which I rated 2 stars. Let's begin with some positives. I think the author, Emily Henry, is very smart and productive. She seems to have mastered the art of strategic book releases, timed perfectly right before the summer season. Let's take a look. Beach Read was released on the 18th of May 2020. You and Me on Vacation on the 11th of May 2021. Book Lovers on the 3rd of May 2022. Her latest work, Happy Place, follows a similar trend that feels almost too calculated. It was published on the 25th of April. Just looking at this trend and her 2024 release, she seems to rely on the appeal of a seasonal setting and the allure of a romantic getaway rather than the strength of the narrative itself. And I fell victim to it. In case you're wondering, I live in Australia and it's summer now, so I picked this book up. It's really hot in this room for some reason and I have to change. And I'll eat this before I continue. Okay, I'm back. And yeah, basically halfway through this book, I realized that Emily Henry built a friendship because this is a friends to lovers romance that I care nothing about. Basically, we follow Alex and Poppy, two mismatched best friends. Alex is very uptight and Poppy is, very spontaneous, a go-with-the-flow type of person. And for 10 summers, they went on vacation together, but 2 summers ago, something went terribly wrong on their vacation, and they haven't been on speaking terms for 2 years. Now, Poppy works for a magazine company that pays her to go on these expensive trips. This summer, she texts Alex, and he actually texts her back, and they, start catching up with each other. And he tells her that his brother is getting married in Palm Springs, and she's like, really? My company's also paying me to go on a trip in Palm Springs. You want to come together? Like, I can cover your Airbnb expense. Obviously, she made that up, but Alex is on board right away. If you tell me there's a big conflict between them, like at the back of the book it says 2 summers ago all goes wrong, and in the front, their last chance to fall in love. But then this guy is on board right away, and they're staying in this, tiny Airbnb apartment together, like at least booked separate rooms. So clearly it couldn't have been too big of a conflict to begin with, Make me care about it. And the rest of the story just unfolds quite predictably. Of course, there's going to be a 3rd act conflict, but it was so forced that it almost made me laugh. Like, it's ridiculous. And the ending is exactly what you think it's going to be. So I think it could have been a better book if we could see things from Alex's perspective, because I was caught up in this chaotic girl's mind all the time. Like, I tried so hard to like this book by having it, but that didn't work. And again, it really makes me question, is this book genuinely captivating, or is it simply banking on the seasonal trend? Because on Goodreads, over 1 million people have read and rated this book. Like, you would expect a book like this to be a good one, right? I don't know, I guess I was just a bit disappointed. And then I read Alone with You in the Ether by Olivie, and it took me 4 months to finish this book, and I didn't like it. I gave it 1 star, but it does match the plate that I recently bought. That's so random. Before I dive into this book, I want to say that I have read the author's acknowledgements at the end of the book where she shared her struggles with bipolar disorder and how writing served as a therapeutic outlet for her, which prompted her to write this book. And the main character of the book also suffers from the same mental illness. It must have taken her tremendous effort to write about her vulnerabilities. So for that, I applaud her. Here comes the but. I like to keep trying the books that are, big on book talk because there are some good ones, but this one is just, for me, insufferable. I'm so sorry. There are 3 reasons why. The writing, the 2 main characters, and their codependent relationship. Before I explain everything, I have to say this for the peace of my own mind. The main guy, according to the author, is studying theoretical mathematics. There's no such thing as theoretical maths. There's only pure maths. But the main guy is also writing a thesis on quantum physics, according to the author. So what he should be studying is theoretical physics, not theoretical maths. So I just want to get the definitions right. In the story, we follow Regan and Aldo. Regan is an artist working at an art gallery. She has bipolar disorder and has a boyfriend called Mark, who appears no more than 5 or 6 times in the book. Aldo is the main guy doing a PhD in theoretical maths, or as I've suggested, theoretical physics. And he tends to overanalyze everything using maths and physics, which gets really cringy. And the 2 characters' first encounter is in the art gallery where Regan works, and they basically start to flirt. So yeah, about 2/3 of the book is Regan cheating on her boyfriend, which I didn't expect at all. And as you read, you're gonna see how this cheating story unfolds into a love story. And now, why don't I tell you why I don't like this book? The main girl, I should add, is seeing a therapist and is taking, or should be taking, medication for her bipolar disorder. But she uses her relationship with Aldo as a form of therapy and substitutes medication with their codependence. So you see a lot of therapy in the form of sex. I don't want to comment too much on the main girl's behavior because she has bipolar disorder. I understand she has mood swings. But what she does, seeking comfort from sex and from another guy instead of working on herself and seeing her therapist, is detrimental to her in the long run. Yes, it's great to see the 2 main characters start to understand and probably perhaps maybe love each other. But what does Nick's mom say to Nick when he finds out that Charlie has an eating disorder? Love can't cure a mental illness. She needs a professional's help. And the writing is also not as good as I'd imagined because many people said the writing was beautiful, but to me it shifts back and forth between something abstract and novel to downright confusion and barbarism. I'll just pop some random quotes on the screen. And this one, oh my god, you have to read this. So basically, the author just decided to use punctuations and blanks. What a mood! I wonder how the audiobook narrator read this. Instead, he took exclamation marks when she took question marks. And then the main guy, the PhD student, really lacks the common sense and conscientiousness you'd expect from an academic. He teaches calculus 2 to uni students and is such a bad teacher. His students complain about him and he's just being somewhat nonchalant about it. This is really irresponsible because calculus 2, and I don't know how you can mess up teaching calculus 2 anyway, because it's a relatively easy math subject to teach. And then this guy likes to use maths to explain his obsession with Regan. For example, in a family gathering, he says this to Regan's sister. So most people are fairly straightforward functions of x and y, behaving within constraints of expectation. So within these parameters, some people are exponential functions, but still largely predictable. Regan isn't just difficult, she's convoluted. She'd have to be measured infinitely in order to be calculated, which no one could ever do. Don't tell me this is romantic. Not a single person that I know and studied maths talks like that. Anyways, that's this book. Let's move on. Then I read Interview with a Vampire by Anne Rice, which I rated 3 stars. Not because it's mediocre, but because there was something that I wasn't prepared for at all. Something bordering on pedophilia. And because Anne Rice's writing is very flamboyant, very lush, so I thought I was reading Lolita again. This book is titled Interview with a Vampire, so obviously there's an interview. And this entire book is actually just one single interview conducted over one night. And we follow Louis, the vampire, being interviewed by a random boy who meets him at a bar. I don't remember if it's a bar, but who cares. The entire book is his recount of his life from the year he was turned into a vampire to where he is now, which spans almost 2 centuries. Louis was born in France in the mid-18th century and later immigrated to Louisiana, where he becomes a plantation owner. He gets really rich at the age of 25, and that's how he becomes the target of Lestat, the vampire who turns him into a vampire, because Lestat still has a mortal living father who's blind and needs caretaking and a shelter. And after Louis undergoes his transformation, you can see this power dynamic or power imbalance between him, a fledgling, and Lestat, an old and very experienced vampire. Lestat keeps telling Louis that he has some, vampiric knowledge that Louis is not privy to, and uses that as a threat to keep Louis with him. Later, by the way, this is the part where the story becomes creepy. Lestat induces Louis to suck the blood of a 5-year-old girl called Claudia, and Lestat turns her into a vampire daughter for them to give Louis another reason to stay with him, because Louis is in love with her. She is 5. Oh my god. Even this is in the 19th century, I don't think that's normal. And meant to make it even more creepy, because Claudia was very little when she was turned into a vampire. So as she grows up, her body doesn't change, and so she only grows up mentally. So she's a woman trapped in a girl's body. And on page 94, this is how Louis describes her. There was something dreadfully sensual about her lounging on the setting in a tiny nightgown of lace and stitched pearls. She became an eerie and powerful seductress, a voice as clear and sweet as ever, though it had a resonance which was womanish, a sharpness sometimes that proved shocking. But you have to remember, she has a body of a 5-year-old. And when I reached this page, I think I just put the book down and didn't read it for 2 weeks. And the way Louis treats Claudia is almost like grooming her. He, for example, nurtures her appreciation for music and literature. And on page 95, I'm just gonna read this to you. Doll, I called her. That's what she was. A magic doll. Laughter and infinite intellect. And then the round-cheeked face, the butt mouth. Let me dress you. Let me brush your hair. Actually, I forgot, but at this point, they're already lovers. On page 94, she pressed her tiny cupid's bow to my lips and put her gleaming eye to my eye until our lashes touched. And laughing, we reeled about the room as if to the wildest waltz. Father and daughter, lover and lover. I know at this point, Louis is way above 100 years old and Claudia 70, but still, physically, they have the bodies of a 5-year-old and 25-year-old. I just can't bear the sight of it. And the vampires, well, at least Louis is bisexual. And other vampires like Lestat are gay, which reminds me of Count Dracula. And there's something kind of homoerotic on page 209. By the way, there's no chapters in the book, so that's why I'm referencing the page numbers. Basically, Louis is sucking the blood of a teenage boy. He was pressing the length of his body against me now, and I felt the hard strength of his sex beneath his clothes pressing against my leg. I don't know what to say. I just wanted to read this to people. Enter Armand, my favorite character. When it comes to vampires, we tend to romanticize them as suave, beautiful, sexy, and brooding creatures. They're also very rich because of compound interest. But then Armand says this to Louis. How many vampires do you think have the stamina for immortality? They have the most dismal notions of immortality to begin with. For in becoming immortal, they want all the forms of their life to be fixed as they are and incorruptible. Carriages made in the same dependable fashion, clothing of the cut which suited their prime, men attired and speaking in the manner they have always understood and valued. When in fact, all things change except the vampire himself. Everything except the vampire is subject to constant corruption and distortion. Soon, with an inflexible mind, and often even with the most flexible mind, this immortality becomes a potential sentence in a madhouse of figures and forms that are hopelessly unintelligible and without value. I think Armand elevates the story to a new level, but the ending was a bit underwhelming, I think. So I don't think I'll keep on reading the Vampire Chronicles. Or maybe I will. Who knows? By the way, I just found a Goodreads review that summarizes this book perfectly. Indeed, what a stupid ending. Okay, let's break this bad review trend with a 5-star book that made me cry. A Man Called Ove. I bought this book on Kindle in December 2017 and 6 years later I finally read it. It's so heartwarming and I am so late to it. So if you haven't already, you have to read this book. But I must put a content warning for suicide. This book is about love, loss, grief, the power of unexpected friendships, how the community and people around you can change you and make your life colourful, and that the people we meet aren't always who they appear to be on the surface. It starts with an old man, Uwe, who goes to a store to buy a computer, but is unable to understand the difference between a computer and an iPad, which irritates the staff. And then we see Uwe doing his neighborhood inspection rounds, which he does every morning. And if Uwe catches the person who breaks the rules, like parking for too long, then that person is in trouble. So Uwe's quite fussy, grumpy, unlikable, and highly critical of others. And recently, before the start of the story, he lost his job and his wife also passed away. So he really has nothing to live for and decides to take his own life. But the arrival of his new neighbors, especially Pavana, brings an unexpected twist to his provincial life. Pavana also discerns a kind soul beneath Uwe's gruff exterior, one that clings to his principles and the person he loves dearly, which is his wife. And I really like the way the story is told. The narrative basically weaves together Uwe's past and present to reveal the layers of his personality. And as the story unfolds, you can see how his past has shaped him into the man he is today. And there's a line in the book that says, "A time like that comes for all men when they choose what sort of man they want to be. And if you don't know the story, you don't know the man." So yeah, he is a man of action rather than words. And his quiet attentiveness endeared him to Sonia, who'd later fall in love with him and become his wife. And here's another amazing quote from his wife that I want to read to you. "Loving someone is like moving into a house. At first you fall in love with all the new things, amazed every morning that all this belongs to you, as if fearing that someone would suddenly come rushing in through the door to explain that a terrible mistake had been made. You weren't actually supposed to live in a wonderful place like this. Then over the years the walls become weathered, the wood splinters here and there, and you start to love the house not so much because of all its perfection, but rather its imperfections. You get to know all the nooks and crannies, how to avoid getting the key caught in the lock when it's cold outside, which of the floorboards flex slightly when one steps on them, or exactly how to open the wardrobe doors without their creaking. These are the little secrets that make it your home." So yeah, that's A Man Called Uwe, and I really need to get my hands on a physical copy of it. And in this month I read My Grandmother Sends Her Regards and Apologises by the same author, which I rated 3 stars. I didn't like it as much as I did A Man Called Uwe because the world building of the story is a bit too elaborate, I'd say. Basically, there's a grandmother, Granny, and her 7-year-old granddaughter, Elsa. And just like how the narrative of A Man Called Uwe blends the timeline, in this book, reality is interwoven with the fairy tales of the Land of Almost Awake, created by Granny. Granny passed away in the 7th chapter, if I remember correctly, and from then on, the story becomes a treasure hunt, Elsa's treasure hunt. Granny did a lot of things she wasn't proud of in her lifetime, so she entrusted Elsa with the task of, delivering all her letters, hence the title, My Grandmother Sends Her Regards and Apologises. There's also a second layer to the story. Remember the fairy tales Granny used to tell Elsa? Well, many creatures in them are actually inspired by the people to whom Granny apologizes in real life, which I thought was ingenious at first. But every 1 or 2 chapters there's a long story about the angels, princes, prisons, whatever, in the Land of Almost Awake, which deviates from the main storyline, and that kind of puts me off. But I do appreciate the author's storytelling, so I'll keep reading his books. The last book for today's video is Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen, which I think would be a great introduction to Jane Austen and her use of free indirect speech. It's also a lot shorter than her other works because Northanger Abbey was the first novel she drafted, but obviously she revised it after writing Pride and Prejudice and Sense and Sensibility. Although the romance in the story is a bit questionable, her story is never just about romance, and her style and skills are exemplary. And I really liked her, playful and peekaboo-like interventions. This novel is basically a satire of Gothic novels popular during Jane Austen's time. We follow Catherine Morland, a young woman obsessed with reading Gothic novels who goes on a trip to Bath. Why is she going there, you ask? Well, because when a young lady is to be a heroine, something must and will happen to throw a hero in her way. In the pump room, she becomes acquainted with the Tilney family, including the charming Henry Tilney. But Catherine's imagination, fueled by her love for Gothic novels, leads her to interpret events and others' intentions in a melodramatic way that leads to some serious misunderstandings, especially in her visit to the Tilney's ancestral home, Northanger Abbey. For example, she expects the Abbey to be a Gothic castle with a villain residing in it. This part is really brilliant because Jane Austen satirizes the conventions of Gothic literature by writing a semi-Gothic novel herself. And there's something in the afterword of this edition of Northanger Abbey that I wanted to share because my own words failed me. Within the novel, Catherine attempts to fashion herself as a heroine, and Austen plays with her self-fashioned heroine from without. The great irony of Northanger Abbey is that Catherine is right in suspecting that she is a heroine. Her only mistake is genre. She thinks she's in a Gothic romance, and then a love story. But in fact, she is wandering through a literary labyrinth. There's also the debate regarding the romance between Catherine and Henry and if their marriage will be long-lasting because of the mismatch between their personality, which makes their, relationship quite unconvincing. Catherine is unaffected and innocent, which attracts Henry's attention at first. But she is also gullible and ignorant. So when Henry teases her, she doesn't even know that he's being playful or sarcastic, which makes her not a very good match for Henry's wit, which is Henry's main personality trait. Most of the time, Catherine can't appreciate Henry's satire, so they don't complement each other as well as, for example, Elizabeth and Mr. Darcy, or Anne and Captain Wentworth. I wish I could say more on this book, but I don't think I am well read enough to review Jane Austen's books, so let me know what you think. I gave this book 3.5 stars at first, but I'm thinking, bumping it up to 4 stars because, I quite like this book after just what I said. Anyways, that's my last wrap up of the year 2023. I do hope I can finish editing before Christmas, I don't know. Thank you for watching as always, and Merry Christmas.